Episodes 19 and 20 are effectively just one long episode, so their summary kinda gets smushed together, sort of like I did back with the initiation arc. Regardless, we're at the finale. The episode opens with Torchwick and Neo overseeing a small fleet of bullheads all lined up inside of an aviation warehouse. He turns to a collection of White Fang disguised thieves and orders them to move out. Roman thumbs through a pamphlet of the Vital Festival with images of priceless art on it, with Roman even making a snide remark about how big a fan he is of the classics. We snap back to RWBY and Weiss, who are still staring awkwardly at each other. RWBY says they should probably sit down, and Weiss, seemingly drained, agrees. The two slowly, almost painfully, apologize to one another. Weiss for being so unruly and disrespectful, and RWBY for being so childish. RWBY admits that it's hard being a good leader, and Weiss adds self-deprecatingly that it doesn't help when the people under you don't listen. After sharing some kinder words, the two stand, and RWBY declares that they're going to sweep all this under the rug and start from scratch. RWBY reintroduces herself to Weiss, properly this time with a handshake, and says both confidently and invitingly that she'll be Weiss's partner and team leader for the next 4 years, and she looks forward to having Weiss at her side. Weiss cracks a smile and reintroduces herself properly as well, making the bold statement that she'll be the best partner RWBY will ever have. Of course, RWBY playfully challenges that comment, and Weiss plays along, earning the first genuine, unfettered laugh between the two in the series. Of course, then Weiss asks about Blake, though it's clear that even with this change in character, she's uneasy about Blake's history. RWBY answers that Yang found her, though she went quiet so they could talk things out. Weiss is equal part relieved and on edge. RWBY says that she's confident Yang can handle things and that they'll see the two in the morning. Instead, she says that Pyrrha definitely just invited them to free pancakes, so why not take them up on the offer. Weiss is skeptic about pancakes at night, but RWBY talks her into it. Back at Tuckson's, Blake and Yang are settling in for the night, with Yang taking Tuckson's couch. During some amiable conversation, the White Fang crops up, and Blake mentions she's hearing rumors of the White Fang suddenly committing more crimes inside of Vale, which was news that hadn't quite reached Beacon's rumor mill. It probably didn't help she actively avoided anything White Fang related while at school. However, she thought it was odd that the White Fang would do any kind of terrorist work while in Vale, since it was arguably one of the most amicable kingdoms towards the Faunus, and wonders if she overheard about them being framed was true. Tuxon joins them and chimes in, not surprised that Blake's heard rumors. Someone is trying to frame the White Fang for their own crimes. Blake, though objecting to the White Fang's methods, knows that these crimes are only going to really affect the public's perception of the Faunus, and the White Fang will only become more violent in return for the damaged reputation. Yan posits the idea of clearing the White Fang's name and uses the same logic that Sun used at that point to get an inkling as to what to look for. Tuxon makes note that there are priceless Mantelian art pieces being shipped in from the Vital Festival, and we as an audience can key into how precious these pieces are because the censorship of art in Mantle would have been brought up during the history class back in episode 12. Yang and Blake set out to stop the crime, with Yang sending a quick message to RWBY to meet them at the docks where the art is being sent. We briefly cut back to RWBY mid-pancake with Juniper and Weiss, being interrupted by the message. Everyone seems to be having a good time, but her eyes bug out at the message and grabs Weiss before booking it out the door. Nora just shrugs and carries on eating while the other three watch in confusion. When Yang and Blake arrive, they find the dog guards and workers unconscious or dead and the place crawling with White Fang imposters. Blake also sees Torchwick among them, giving them instructions, and in her rage sneaks over to hold them hostage. She pleads to the Faunus and the crowd of robbers to think about what they're doing, to think how badly keeping at this will hurt the image of Faunus to the rest of the world. One or two give pause, but most are unimpressed. Torchwick laughs her off and uses his cane to escape, kickstarting a fight between himself, his men, Blake, and Yang. Yang of course comes in and is just an awesome powerhouse, kicking the living crap out of just about every grunt there is, similar to how she did in the Yellow trailer. During the fight, Torchwick even mentions seeing her at Junior's bar before heading out the door, somewhat amused by the coincidence. During all this, RWBY and Weiss are rushing to back up Yang and Blake using RWBY's semblance, with RWBY even seeing Yang take damage on the team leader readout she has on her scroll. As a nice additional touch, we'll have Blake's status be unavailable because she shut off her scroll so they wouldn't be able to track her. Still, the two are hightailing it and they run into Penny, doing a surprising amount of work by herself. She mentions it's because all the other workers have to sleep, which catches a raised eyebrow from the partners, but they don't have time for pleasantries. They explain the situation to Penny, who comments that she saw Yang earlier that evening and even point her in the direction that Blake had gone, thus explaining in some depth how Yang had managed to track Blake down. Penny decides to join them, even when RWBY says it'll be dangerous, to which the Ginger replies that she's combat ready. They get going, and as they rush, Penny calls the cops. Cut back, and Blake and Yang have taken out most of the ground forces, leaving Torchwick alone. He manages to hold off Blake, but Yang begins proving an issue just as one of his bullheads arrive to deliver Neo. This is the first confrontation between Yang and Neo, and will go a long way towards establishing their rivalry that was never really established in the original Volume 2. But yes, Yang vs Neo and Blake vs Torchwick, with both Beacon Girls seemingly being outclassed by the two criminals at every turn. Torchwick eventually gets the upper hand on Blake, so much so that we see her aura flaring, which we know from previous fights means that she's almost out of juice. He fires a shot at her, something we can guess will either gravely injure or kill her, only for it to be blocked by a wall of ice. Blake looks up to find Weiss and RWBY, both out of breath from rushing, standing defensively in front of her. Blake is happy to see RWBY, but confused to see Weiss, who simply says they'll talk when they all get out of this alive. Team RWBY finally comes together in an Avengers-esque shot, and RWBY and Torchwick share a little banter. Yang also mentions how slippery Neo is, and RWBY postulates a plan. She tells Weiss and Blake to go after Neo, or Snowcone as Yang has nicknamed her, and Yang and herself will handle Torchwick, a strategy that ends with them gaining territory against the criminal duo. That is until the rest of Torchwick's bullhead fleet shows up and begins firing down at the team, to the point that Weiss is having difficult maintaining defensive ice walls. Penny at this point steps into the fight, having seemed hesitant during the entire confrontation. She jumps forward with her swords and blows the ever-living crap out of each bullhead, with several of them crashing into a nearby building. RWBY is about to run off and make sure that people in the building are safe, only for Penny to inform her that it's an abandoned train station and thus there should be no casualties from anyone other than the opposition. Realizing how south the situation is going, Torchwick hops on a bullhead with Neo and the two try to take off, only to be shot down and crash into the same train station as the rest. After all the damage, the train station finally collapses in on itself just as the authorities begin to arrive. We see time cut forward a little bit to all four of them getting treated for wounds, and Weiss gives her little "I don't care" speech, though without the timestamp because it most certainly has been more than 12 hours at this point, and Weiss was never really part of the search. Effectively, Weiss decides to give Blake a shot. There's still thin ice between them, but whatever happened in Blake's past can gladly stay there for all Weiss cares. RWBY cheers that her team is back together, though quickly wonders how they're going to explain all that property damage to the authorities. They're about to ask Penny her opinion, only to notice that she's missing. The last shot we have before cutting away from Team RWBY for the season is of Penny being driven away by her guardian, who shides her for such a ridiculous interpretation of protocol. We cut to Ozpin, sipping coffee and going over the incoming reports about RWBY and the docks, smiling somewhat to himself, only for the smile to drop when he gets a message from Crow about the Queen having pawns. In an after-credits scene, we see that Roman and Neo survive the crash along with a few of his henchmen, and are trapped in an underground train tunnel. However, several other people wearing different, more official-looking White Fang outfits hold them up. Roman tries to order them around, only for one of his own men to say, "Those guys aren't ours." It clicks for Roman that these are actual White Fang, and that in a devilishly ironic twist, they've been captured by the terrorist organization. A fact that Roman can't help but laugh at. He ain't even mad. When one of the Fang members suggests killing the imposters along with Torchwick and his crew, a new female voice turns them down, saying they could use them. The screen lingers only so long as a feminine hand captured in flame rises to the foreground, only to snuff it out and fade to black, setting the scene for Season 2. And there we have it. Season 1 of RWBY ready to ship with complete storylines and character arcs all intact. You might notice a few key absences, the most prominent being Sun. Even though he was fantastically voiced, consistently written, and technically did contribute to the plot, he was ultimately a superfluous character in the original version, and his role would have been fulfilled by any character that interacted with Blake, hence why I put Yang in that situation in order to facilitate character growth between partners, instead of being two relative strangers. Don't think he's gone completely though, he will show back up in Season 2 for sure. The other big absence, Cinder, is a different story, as her presence in the show didn't add much of anything and only really served as an extended cameo anyway. In fact, her presence robbed Roman of any form of initiative of his own, and giving him a start in the show as the lead villain with only his own plans will only serve to elevate Cinder when she absorbs Torchwick and his conglomerate into her own. By making him his own actor from the start, we have a better context to understand the true depths of villainy that RWBY will have to face going forward. He's also a good ground-level villain for us to begin gauging relative power levels off of, since having multiple high-tiered combatants fighting right off the bat only serves to muddy any kind of baseline. The other glaring change is probably the fact that I foisted Coffee into the spotlight as RWBY's mentor figures. This is done in order to establish a goal for Team RWBY to reach, that of a second-year team, and to better observe each of RWBY's members' personalities, flaws and all. It allows the characters to open up not to each other, but to neutral voices of reason, which help us understand what measures need to happen for them to improve as people and teammates. It also allows us to see the other side of Carton's bullying and mirror his racism with Weiss's in the form of Velvet's torture, while also allowing us a small taste of closure and payback for her suffering. Because damn it, that adorable little bunny girl needs to be protected and loved. With all that touched upon, I want to thank you all for watching through this monster of a video. I know it's quite possibly been a slog in some places, especially where I was effectively recapping events that happened unmolested from the original version. However, all of this entire video, is only my opinion on how RWBY should have been handled. Feel free to agree or disagree, but as always, leave your thoughts in the comments down below. Just be sure to keep debates and arguments civil and genial. We're all fans of RWBY here, no need to be belligerent to one another. Like the first two videos, thoughtful critique and fitting additions or thoughts will be addressed in a second, more candid video, so I implore you keyboard warriors to get started. Though, maybe use bullet points if you have a post longer than 3 paragraphs. It makes reading long comments so much easier. Shout out to FamtanFalling for helping me edit the script to this video, and a huge shout out to Moderately Entertain for creating, editing, and maintaining the Adding Flavor to Remnant Google document, which you can check out down in the description below. Feel free to add your own ideas, just be sure not to step on anyone's toes down there, aye? Thank you for watching Section 5 of Fixing RWBY Part 3. I'd love to give a big shout out to all of my wonderful patrons who have each helped this channel grow into what it is today. If you want to support the channel, please consider donating at patreon.com/CelticPhoenix. Remember, by donating $1 or more, you can get access to the Team Frostbite Discord server, where personalities like myself, FamtanFalling, and Tom Horan of Six Lick Productions regularly interact with our supporters. Thank you so much for watching Part 3 of Fixing RWBY. Catch you all on the flip side.